Well, there's still continuing criticism today of that agreement between the United Kingdom, that's Britain, and Rwanda that would see Rwanda taking in thousands of asylum seekers from the UK following some vetting processes. Now, latest figures show that over 2,000 refugees arrived in the UK in April alone. Let's look at this issue then holistically as far as migration is concerned. I'm joined now by Professor David Monyae, the Director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, good to have you on Newzroom Afrika. First things first, is the criticism of this deal justified?
Indeed, it is. We have to look at Rwanda in a historical context. This is a country that lost 1 million people, and UK did nothing as a member of Permanent Security Council of the UN. And it's a very poor country, plagued with endless crises in the Great Lake region with massive refugees from neighboring countries. In this instance, choosing to prefer refugees from UK instead of assisting fellow Africans. In itself, it appears that Rwanda is going for the money and the big name that comes with it, instead of a principled position in terms of assisting the UN refugee in light of the United Nations principles. And this is really unacceptable.
Well, in her defense of the agreement, the UK's Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said that this agreement would basically put people smugglers out of business. She went on to say that it would also help stop people dying on dangerous routes to the UK. Does the end justify the means?
Not at all. These are excuses that are being made by UK. They really know, and the Prime Minister Johnson is quite aware that what he's doing is wrong. It's not in line with the international norms and values that govern the management of refugees. At this stage, this is a country that preaches human rights and good treatment of people all over the world as part of the UK foreign policy and the right at the center of a liberal democratic order. But in terms of practice, what the UK is doing is sending a wrong signal to the international community in terms of prioritizing only white Europeans coming from Ukraine at the moment at the expense of refugees of color coming from Arab countries as well as Africa.
There's also been the perception, isn't it, that migration is largely a European problem where people are fleeing Africa, the Middle East, to seek refuge there. But when you look at the data, that's not necessarily true. There's, in fact, a lot more movement of people on the African continent itself, no?
Africa has more people on the move. But when we look at the powerful countries such as the UK and United States, you have a situation in which their own foreign policies causing some of this massive movement of people. For instance, the bombing of Libya in 2011. It brought in massive number of people, causing massive damage in the entire Sahel regions, as well as the wars in Iraq, unnecessary wars in Syria, in Yemen, in Afghanistan. All these are policies that were advanced by United Kingdom, Britain, supporting United States, and therefore this has caused this wave of massive people on the move. There are other fair reasons that people are on the move. There's drought in most of these regions. We have unemployment and underdevelopment, and therefore I think UK could take a much better option in terms of how to manage this effectively without using a racist policy that they are pushing with regards to Rwanda refugees.
You mentioned the involvement of the West and the instability in some of these countries where people are fleeing. Does that then make them more morally responsible, the UK, broader Europe and the Americans, for the refugee intake?
Indeed. I think they need to look how best to use United Nations, to use a collective approach and inject enough resources in assisting people from where the sources of crisis is from. Avoid these wars of hegemony that they are are pushing in Yemen and what they are doing in Libya, what they have been doing in all these hotspots that is causing these crises. And assisting in terms of developmental aid that is needed, particularly on the African continent, working with the African Union in terms of strengthening Africa's institutions of governance and developmental approach. I think if UK could do more on that front, there will be less people swimming across the Mediterranean waters into UK.
I wonder, Professor Monyae, if there's any lesson to learn for South Africa and this story on the back of the ongoing conversation in this country about illegal immigration and people who are undocumented being in some communities and accused of perpetuating the high levels of crime. People saying that what's happening is you've got now a situation where undocumented migrants in South Africa are taking up the bulk of economic opportunities, especially among the unskilled.
There is quite similarities on this. South Africa, and by and large, it's a country that is doing the best it can. However, what we see is the rise of fascism in the US, in the European Union, particularly on the issue of migration, which our own people, some of our own people, are now getting into this wave of fascism, anti-foreign. But I think South Africa has done extremely well. I think it needs to do more in terms of working closely with fellow African countries in dealing with the source of the conflict in most of these countries, the lack of development, particularly in neighboring countries, working together ensure that you don't have an even movement of people. By and large, the continent is moving towards integration, which is all countries want. But however, you cannot have only one country receiving more people than others. In Southern Africa, therefore, there is a need for South Africa to really play a critical role in dealing with conflict resolution in fellow African countries.
Professor David Monyae, good to have your time. Thank you so much for being on the program today.